is the DNC chairwoman, Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Good morning to you, Congresswoman.
Good morning, Gretchen.
I have a sneaking suspicion of why you're up in New Hampshire. That's where the debate took place last night for people on the other side of the fence who you sometimes disagree with. So I wanted to get your take on the whole debate because it really focused on jobs and the economy at the same time that the Senate was voting down President Obama's jobs bill. Was that interesting to you?
Well, it was really disappointing. If you looked at the Republican debate, you had not a single one of those candidates on the stage at the desk last night who proposed any job-creating measure that would put the middle class back to work or help working families. At the same time, you had Republicans in the United States Senate who were willing to allow the economy to suffocate just to be able to make political gains in an election next year. And I think the American people just wish that the Republicans cared about more than just one job, Barack Obama's, than they do about American jobs, which the president's been fighting so hard to create and get the economy turned around.
What about the Senate?
So that was my take.
What about the Senate saying no to the president's job plan at the same time, right before the debate started?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is that I thought the juxtaposition really underscored the insensitivity and the fact that the Republicans in the United States Senate and Republicans in the leadership in general seem willing to suffocate the economy in order to be able to make political gains. And that callous indifference, I think, is going to come back to bite them.
Right. That subject came up last night. Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney covered it. Let's listen.
First of all, the Congress couldn't figure out how to get the debt ceiling done with a president who showed zero leadership. So they adopt a truly stupid bill.
I'm not very good at being on mission, but I can tell you this, that I'm not going to have to call up Timothy Geithner and say, how does the economy work? Because I spent my life in the economy.
Your reaction to their reaction?
Well, Mitt Romney's take on the economy, if it's his perspective that he's offering, where he equates corporations to people, where he really is so wishy-washy on the issues that it's like trying to nail down Jell-O, getting him to commit to any one position. I can understand why Republican voters don't seem to be able to settle on him, because when you take all sides of an issue, it doesn't inspire much confidence. We need to make sure that we have a president like President Obama. Whether you agree or disagree him, he has the courage of his convictions. He presses forward. He's fighting hard to make sure that the middle class and working families get a fair shake. And Republicans seem obsessed with making sure that the wealthy, most fortunate Americans in corporate America have the wind at their backs. Well, that's the contrast that we're going to have in the election next year.
Well, that, of course, is your perspective sitting at the top of the Democrat Party.
It is.
Absolutely. That's what that's what you're there for.
I think that's the perspective of millions of middle-class Americans, too.
Well, I'm sure it is. And many people looking in on the jobs bill, and as Gretch mentioned, it was defeated in the U.S. Senate. Bipartisan, we should point out, in its defeat, because there were Democrats who voted against it as well as Republicans.
But a majority of the United States Senate supported it.
But as you look at the president who's been outselling it relentlessly, pass this bill, you know, some of the things he's been saying on the stump simply have not proven to be true. AP Fact Check looked at his claim a couple of days ago that 280,000 teachers would be preventing from losing their jobs, and Fact Check says that is simply not true. Do you think some have said there are just too many assumptions the president put into his plan to possibly happen?
It is absolutely critical that we pass the American Jobs Act, because there's no question that we would make sure that thousands of teachers would be able to remain on the job. Thousands of firefighters and police officers would remain on the job. We'd put construction workers back to work, making sure that we could fix bridges like the one in John Boehner's district that is badly in need of repair. We'd be able to make sure that we give a payroll tax cut to small business owners and extend the payroll tax cut that we gave to middle-class folks last year. Right here in New Hampshire, the average New Hampshire family would get about a $2,000 tax break.
Right.
are the Republicans opposed to?
Well, they're doing it piece by piece, as you know.
They don't want to see the economy turn
Congresswoman,
around,
as you know, they're going to do it piece by piece. In the big picture, if the president really wanted to get it passed, don't you think he would have been better off meeting with leadership on the other side to find out what their problem was rather than go right out on the stump? And in the other big picture, do you feel as though...
Well, let's ask him. Have you asked him?
Senator,
get Eric Cantor on here and have him identify what piece of this is he opposed to.
The president?
Because all of these things... No,
okay.
Eric Cantor.
Senator
Why don't you get him
McConnell
on here and ask him what's he opposed to?
Because he didn't come to leadership, didn't return their calls before the speech, hasn't met with them since, that it might have been the plan all along to put the jobs bill out there, something that the Republicans couldn't get behind, and then run against what they couldn't pass.
You mean you're citing Mitch McConnell, the guy who at the beginning of this Congress said that his #1 priority was defeating Barack Obama, not putting people back to work, not getting the economy turned around, not working with congressional Democrats so we could move the economy forward?
I think you are right.
I don't think that there's much credibility there.
He did say that making Barack Obama a one-term president was his goal. But I think it's the same way a Democrat would say making George Bush a one-term president would be their goal. But he never said he's against putting Americans back to work.
There's a difference between saying that you have a goal of a political goal of defeating the president. Mitch McConnell was quoted saying his #1 priority, his top priority, was to defeat Barack Obama and make sure that, that the Republicans could take control. If that's your frame, if that's your #1 goal, then everything you do is driven by that goal, which is why the Republicans cynically voted down the American Jobs Act, which 75% of the American people support. They support it because we want to make sure that the middle-class folks get a tax break and all the tax benefits don't go to the wealthiest Americans. We want to make sure that we keep teachers on the job. We want to make sure that we're not putting
we have to go in debt to do it.
business
and
back in the driver's seat.
that's why there's two political parties, because, you know, Mitch McConnell believes that if he got a Republican in as president, that they would create more jobs. I got to quickly ask you, though,
about
about
people elect leaders, though. They elect us to work
create
together.
jobs. I think, trust me, this time around, they're going to be electing a leader that's going to create some jobs. Speaking of jobs, I got to get your quick take about the Occupy Wall Street situation, because some people have said that the president's continued discussion about millionaires and billionaires and millionaires and billionaires has created the situation now that we are seeing, which many are deeming class warfare, with these protesters now coming out against millionaires and billionaires.
Well, I do think it's interesting that Fox News, right on that couch, gave a righteous embrace repeatedly to the Tea Party movement when they first began. And I've watched some of your coverage of Occupy Wall Street protesters who simply are middle-class folks who are frustrated that the policy of business and the policy of government, particularly under Republicans leading up to before President Obama took office, focused exclusively on keeping the wind at the backs of corporate America. We can understand that frustration. It would be nice if Fox actually embraced the same type of grassroots movement that Occupy Wall Street is, that you decided and deemed the Tea Party was.
Well, you know what?
Love to see that.
We've heard a lot of people on the left try to make comparisons between the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Boston, Occupy Washington yesterday. But, you know, what's going on in Lower Manhattan, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of people who are frustrated. But, you know, you read the papers, there are a lot of people doing drugs down there. They're defecating on police cars. They're having sex. They're getting arrested. During Tea Party rallies, nobody ever got arrested. I think the arrest total so far is close to 1,000.
You don't want to get fact-checked on that, do you?
Yeah.
You want to get fact-checked on that? That no one at a Tea Party rally anywhere in the country has ever been arrested?
Well, I would
check that
have
before you make a
1,000 people been arrested, ma'am?
There are tens of thousands of people who have been part of the Occupy Wall Street protests, and there are always a handful of people who, you know, are really not going to follow the program.
Let me go back to my original question.
No.
Do you think that President Obama's discussion about millionaires and billionaires created the situation of these protests?
No, I think Republican policies that focused only on benefiting the wealthiest, most fortunate Americans and corporate America, and letting corporate America write their own rules, is what created that frustration. Letting banks make it so that they were too big to fail, and running over consumers.
So
and
you just
causing
indicted
millions of
President Clinton
homeowners
on
to be
that,
upside down
because
in their
most of those rules were put together during the Clinton administration.
I'm indicting President Bush and congressional Republicans who were in charge for 12 years.
When was Glass-Steagall taken down?
And finally started giving the middle class a fair shake.
All right.
That's what the Occupy Wall Street protests are about.
Right.
It's always interesting to have you on the program, always lively as well.
It's interesting for me, too. Thank you so much.
Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, we thank you very much for joining us from New Hampshire.
And coming up next on the Rundown, speaking of those Wall Street protesters,